So, let's get started. With the ending of Diablo IV, many fans of the series were left wondering what exactly could the future of the franchise hold? What new land would we explore? And where would our wandering hero go next? The end of the game left us with quite a bit of speculation, especially given the precarious events that unfolded at the end of the game, leaving Tyrael as the sole steward of the Lord of Hatred. This did not bode well for the world of Sanctuary, as many of us have already seen the efficacy of the Soul Stone within the world of Diablo, let alone one that was never meant to hold Mephisto in the first place, but attuned to make do given the circumstances. In the month of November 2023, we were given our first glimpse of what the future of Diablo IV would be. The expansion, Vessel of Hatred, was announced. And in the developer discussion panel preceding that, we were given some additional details regarding this new development. The trailer and discussion gave us a fairly strong idea of what to expect, and I'd like to explore that in detail. The dense new jungle region was typically known as Toraja, a name that is predominantly used by outsiders, while the natives of this new zone refer to it as Nahantu. It is an area that is steeped in religion, mysticism, and turmoil over the centuries. However, I think our visit to the region during the Vessel of Hatred expansion is likely to find more hints regarding the Zakarum than we are to find elements relating to the Skatsim religion. More on this later. The Zakarum faith began when a wandering ascetic, a name that was given by the jungle folk of Nahantu, though its meaning was lost to time, named Akarat, who had become disillusioned by the world and society and was now seeking enlightenment. He began traveling the world and found himself in the harsh mountains of Xiansai. There, he was granted a vision which he believed to be an angel named Yarius, or Son of Light in his language. However, Deckard Cain remarked years later that he believed that what Akarat saw was an echo of Oldician Ul Diomed, a powerful Nephilim during the events of the Sinwar, nearly 3,000 years ago. The teachings and message he gained from that vision set him on a path to share what he learned with the world. Akarat never cared for titles or position or wealth. He simply wanted to share the virtues of the universe and insight that he had gained regarding the reality of their universe and humankind itself. Once he had done this, he disappeared within the jungles of Nahantu, never to be seen again. Many still search for him till this day, but most presume he is long dead. However, Tyrael believes that this is heresy. Interestingly, the teachings of Akarat remained relatively obscure to the world for nearly 1,000 years, until the Zakarum faith exploded in popularity and had become one of the most dominant religions in the world. They chose to make their empire's capital and home in Kurast. As their influence grew, so too did the zealotry of their faith. Eventually they chose to elect their first leader of the entire order. They were known as the First Kehegen. Many would precede him, but one of the most notable of these figures was called Kalim. Also, during this time, the Horadrim had sought to capture the three prime evils, eventually succeeding in doing so. After the capture of Mephisto, they elected to create a tower near Kurast, known as the Temple City of Travancore, and they chose to bury him deep below. It was to be a holy Mecca, where missionaries from all over the world would pilgrim to. It had inspired even more fervor behind the greatness of this religion, and support grew in spades, allowing the Horadrim to complete this incredible undertaking in a little over a year. The result was immaculate. However, the otherwise pristine and pearlescent shining exterior of the Zakarum religion as a whole was beginning to rot from deep within. The Horadrim had completed their mission, yes, and so too did their numbers dwindle. With the effect of the Horadrim thinned, people who adhered to their teachings and warnings were few and far in between. Mephisto's corruption had found its way into the minds of the region's inhabitants, festering and growing. Eventually, as more and more of the zealous fervor that followers of the Zakarum faith had began turning into malice and fanaticism, it was becoming harder and harder to distinguish the difference between their brutality and kindness. There were, however, a few holdouts, one particular remnant of stoic, unbendable, and unbreakable faith, Khalim. He was incorruptible and would not bend to Mephisto's will. He simply couldn't fathom it. No matter what Mephisto did, his mind would not break. So Mephisto had him killed, and his body split into pieces and spread throughout the region. Eventually, Mephisto puppeted a new Kehegin to take Khalim's place, the man known as Sankakor. He would not only be the new head of the Zakarum faith, but also serve as the host and vessel of Mephisto's new body, allowing his hand to be punctured by the Soul Stone. As this new corrupted order continued to spread across the land of Khajan, this once grand temple city of Travancore and the guardian tower built by the Haradrim, known as the Holy Mecca of the Zakarum faith, had become the Blackened Temple. But even then, history shows that this region has always been a place governed by mysticism and the spirits of the old religion. The Skatsim were once the dominant face of religion in the region before the events of Diablo I and the rise of the Zakarum faith. Many of their relics and magics were lost to time and to being brutally stomped out by the Zakarum zealots, as they viewed this cult as nothing more than heresy. Recalling the events of Act 3 in Diablo II, when the few survivors of Mephisto's corruption fled to the Kuras docks, Heralti created a barrier to help stop the jungle from overtaking their small refuge. But it was failing and losing strength against the onslaught of the jungle's malevolence and the demons that were surrounding them. It was through the power of the Gidbin dagger, located by our hero in Diablo II, an old relic of the Skatsim religion, that Oramus was able to strengthen the barrier and ensure the continued safety of those clinging for survival in the Kuras Docks refuge. During the developer discussions preceding the reveal of the Vessel of Hatred expansion, we are made aware that this region will be a much more expansive approach to the area that has been previously visited by the player during Act 3 of Diablo II. However, instead of only visiting the Kuras Docks and a condensed version of various areas of the jungle leading to the Guardian Tower of the Temple City of Travancore, we can expect to see a much more robust approach and experience to this region, and perhaps never-before-seen areas. In Diablo II, Meshif even had some choice words about the region during Mephisto's corruption.
The jungle is like nothing you've ever seen before. Imagine paradise festering like a wound, then bursting. Kurast was once the greatest city in the world. Now, it is hard to tell where the jungle stops and the city begins. The jungle grows rampant on the soil enriched by the blood of my fellow citizens.
The jungle at times had been known to have a mind of its own, as if living and breathing, encroaching on lands and creeping further into some cities and hovels, especially at the height of Mephisto's influence. But even before Mephisto's corruption, the region had always been home to relics of our past, mystery and the old religion. During the Sinwar, one of the characters named Achilleos had mentioned, it was one of the most dense and unknown regions he had ever heard of, that people from there were said to have oiled their skins black and filed their teeth like daggers. I'm sure everyone has fond memories of jungle flares and Stygian dolls that dwell deep within the jungle. But it has been 72 years since the events of Diablo II, and Kurast and many of the temples and cities now lie in ruins. The region, however, has been no stranger to turmoil. Taraja, or Nahantu, lies within the greater region of Kyrgyzstan, which was previously known as Khajan nearly 3,000 years ago. Kyrgyzstan is broken up into two main portions: the north, which includes areas like the dry steppes, which is dominated by desert and borders the Twin Seas, and the south, which contain the largest rainforest and jungle regions in all the known world. feeding the longest and widest river in Sanctuary, known as the Argentic River. Before the events of Diablo I, sages and mystics and explorers alike from all over the world would visit this unknown region, seeking rare plants, animals, and salves. The use of magic during the Mage Clan Wars affected some of the fauna and creatures, causing the jungle trees and vines to grow to unusual size. Creatures were altered and changed, gaining new abilities and tastes. Hunter-gatherer tribes of the Umbaru of the Tenganzi region would mix potions, poisons, and lived by the mantra of, "To live is to sacrifice is to live." The witch doctors of this tribe were said to have been able to see beyond the world, and through rituals of their own could even experience the truth of the unformed lands. Tyrael noted that the witch doctors of this tribe were the exception, that they could assault both your mind and body. So, what can we expect to find in Nahantu, 72 years after the events of Diablo II? It was noted by Tyrael that after Mephisto was defeated by the heroes of Diablo II, the region fell into deeper turmoil, eventually being overtaken by bandits, thieves, murderers, pirates, and worse. They had made the Kuras docks a natural haven for their ships on their way to smuggle and sail toward the Chaldeum trading district, the new capital of modern-day Kyrgyzstan. This was indicated by some of the early concept art during the development of Diablo III by the artist Peter Lee and others, which was never implemented in the game, as well as various other lore and texts. We also know that paladins and commanders of the Zakarum faith had fallen to Mephisto's corruption. Many of their bodies and spirits still roam certain areas, possibly. Many regions likely lie in ruins due to being destroyed during the Sinwar and the Mage Clan Wars. The furthest southern areas of the jungle is said to be still laden with darkness and mysterious magic. The area is still home to mysterious herbs, fauna, and powerful concoctions, most of which can only be created from the resources of this region. The people of Nahantu also have a great deal of reverence for many animals and creatures. The once great city of Taraja itself, before its destruction, revered a simian known as the Surka, or the people of Istani and its king Chadaka, another long-tailed simian. Other areas like Hashir had reverence for what appeared to be a large lion. These places would create totem-like columns and buildings depicting various animals similar to what we might expect from various Mayan and Incan cultures. In the last 72 years since the events of Diablo II, we know that the jungle itself in some areas has grown anew, full of teeming life and vegetation, appearing as if each new species of plant is fighting for dominance with new and unseen creatures and insects. However, many of the areas corrupted by Mephisto are said to have turned blighted gray and deadened since then. Spoilers ahead. We already know for sure what to expect to some degree when we arrive in Nahantu, however. In the Book of Lorath, he stated that when he traveled to Kurast in search of Tyrael, that hatred had spread. It was a clear indication that Tyrael had finally become aware of her corrupting influence as she carried Mephisto's soul stone through the region, much like what happened in the events of Yelesna in the events preceding Diablo IV and its ending, which also suffered a similar corruption as Tyrael passed through the town. Lorath then notes in his book that after some time, he was able to finally quell its corrupting influence and establish some form of order to a degree, at least in the immediate area. A common theme that appears to be ever present in the world of Diablo is that the player or hero is usually just a bit too late to most events that occur in the world. That leads me to believe that we will be unable to stop whatever events will be taking place in the Vessel of Hatred expansion. However, it is already somewhat known that Mephisto does not escape just yet, as Tyrael manages to continue her travels beyond Kurast, as she travels across the Twin Sea, as noted by the ending of Diablo IV. Perhaps a fragment of his influence creates a new antagonist, or perhaps he himself is somehow split. I'm unsure at this point. We are then left to speculate. What could Tyrael's motivations be? And how much of the story will this expansion cover? Throughout the Book of Lorath, we are given a perspective of events that seem to have already passed. Even at the very beginning of Diablo IV, Lorath seems to speak to the player as if everything is in retrospective and a past tense look at events at the end of each act throughout Diablo IV. The book further emphasizes this point, as many of the passages in the Book of Lorath are of letters he writes to both Tyrael and she to him. Through this, we're made aware of the potential path through which the player might take. The letters are written sparsely through the book, as if broken down into fragments of time or events, as he writes in the book in its entirety. That means that we can assume that every time he writes a letter to Tyrael, it marks a good stopping point in the story of events that are to come, meaning that the Vessel of Hatred expansion will likely only cover our adventure through Nahantu, and perhaps finding a boat leading to our attempted trip to Temis, resulting in a detour from the Scovos Isles. The next expansion will likely include Aranok, areas like Lut Gholein, and perhaps Westmarch. But I doubt that. Blizzard might want to create an expansion for each region, slowly, for obvious reasons. If they wish to create an expansion every year or so, this is likely the path. There is also the prospect of perhaps why Tyrael chose Kurast as the point of port to travel across the Twin Seas. There are other areas of crossing. She noted later that it was foolish of her to take Mephisto to his domain, which resulted in chaos and bloodshed. But there are, of course, powerful relics of the Skatsim religion that may yet lie in wait throughout the region, and perhaps even sparse followers of that sect. Tyrael had noted that there was still some 10,000 followers throughout the world. It is possible that Tyrael either seeks the original or a copy of Lam Esen's Black Book, a powerful sage and mystic who authored it. It is an item of incredible knowledge regarding the true nature of the three prime evils and of the world of Sanctuary. It also contained prophetic visions that Lam Esen was able to glimpse through Skatsim rituals and spells, such as the fall of Mephisto in Diablo II, or even glimpsing an event that has yet to come to pass, known as the End of Days. This book was both a force of good and evil, sought after by both sides of the spectrum. Lorath also noted that its whereabouts are unknown, but that copies of it might have been made, not to mention some of Deckard Cain's work derived from this very book, and some of Lam Esen's findings. The Skatsim did much of their research and rituals hidden away throughout the jungles and the temples of Nahantu. It is also possible that when Tyrael arrived in Kurast, that the sudden burst of Mephisto's power had made her nearly lose herself entirely, resulting in Mephisto gleaming some knowledge from her mind or other secrets she had gained during her time spent in the Horadric vaults, thereby causing her to either have to alter her plan or continue unaware of his influence. This was also noted to us in the Book of Lorath, in her own words, as she stated that she thought she could control Mephisto and his influence somewhat, but that he was merely lying in wait, and that reaching his domain was the perfect opportunity to show her just how much damage he could wreak. This was also the reason why we seem to hear what sounds like her voice praying in a desperate manner during the trailer that they showed us for the Vessel of Hatred. It is also possible that Tyrael is seeking some sort of artifact or remnant of Khalim's power. In Diablo II, the player collects pieces of Khalim's body and flail to create a powerful weapon capable of destroying the compelling orb, which was used to control the minds of some of the most resistant Zakarum faithful. It is said that the flail itself was destroyed during this event, but Lorath stated in his book that fragments may yet remain, and that other weapons or fragments might exist. He also mentioned that imbuing weapons or items with the name of Khalim also granted them powerful magic to resist and repel demons and their influence. We are likely to also see the return of many of the creatures native to the region, like those we experienced in Diablo II, and some new ones. The jungle will likely be divided into various zones. As stated in the lore of Diablo, Toraja, or Nahantu, has always been one jungle, but the rule of man has always seen fit to draw imaginary lines between zones and regions within the jungle, according to some. Only time will tell. and I do hope that Blizzard is able to craft a worthy experience for players who have enjoyed this franchise for decades. Thanks for listening. I'll catch y'all next time.